We welcome Anil Mehta today for the second master class on cinematography. He is a master of his craft, as we all know. He has worked in advertising, documentary, and of course, and corporate film, and of course, Indian mainstream cinema. We've all appreciated all his work. Lagan, Dil De Chuke Sanam, Khamoshi, Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna. And he is presently, you finished shooting it. He finished shooting his directorial debut of Aja Nachle, where we'll be seeing Madhuri Dixit again. Yeah? So I'll just hand over.
Actually, I'm always very hard pressed to take a class on cinematography. I really don't know where to begin. I don't know what to say because I've never taught and I'm not a teacher. So I would like that this session be completely, should flow mainly from you guys about whatever queries you have, about what questions you have about cinematography or anything related to it. And from whatever experience I have, if I can, talk about those things, then that's probably the approach to take. Okay, so what I thought was that before we get started, I know yesterday Dilip has taken you through the paces of actually lighting in this space, which is actually quite wonderful. But I just thought that I'll start so that we are on the same page. Generally, what happens is that everybody has I'm sure most of you have been exposed to film, maybe film students also, and maybe practicing filmmakers. I'm really not sure of the nature of this group. But I just thought so that we are all on the same page, I'll just switch on a light and I'll just take you through the very basics of that light so that when I use the terms, we are talking about the same thing or you're receiving the same thing. So if you can just switch off this projection, put a chair up here. So very, very basic unit of light, tungsten light, halogen light with a Fresnel lens in front of it. I don't know, did Dilip take you I don't know whether you discussed lighting and nature of light and quality of light with Dilip yesterday or just went on to lighting up the space. So very, very basic unit. This is where we all begin. Kind of specular unit of light. And where is the other spill lights all coming from? Lots of other lights on, no? Yeah, can we switch off those powers on top? And this projector can we switch off? There is still some light coming from the projector. Yeah, okay, this is much better. So very, very simple light falling on the object and a very simple shadow that you see behind her. Correct? Where there is light, there is shadow. As basic as that, it seems like it seems like a very, very, very fundamental way to start. But I think it's just good that we go through this thing. It's like the notes of the sargam. You know that they are what they are, but you can spend a lifetime learning music and practicing it. You're right down here. No, 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 that's okay. I'm used to doing it. So if she looks in front, if you look in front, and you see the nature of the shadow, and you see the nature of light on her face, I don't want to say anything about it because you're seeing it. I just don't want to describe it to you. But I just want you to see the quality of the shadow and the quality of the light on her face. No, no, let it be, let the light go. So what I've done is I've opened the lens and now the naked bulb is actually exposed and the nature of the shadow is, if I took this light further away, the nature of the shadow would become crisper. So basically this light actually simulates what we call a point source and it also simulates what the sun looks like to us here on earth, in the sense that it's a point source at infinity, so the shadow that it casts is the clearest shadow. What we will refer to later as specular light or harsh light or naked light. What the lens does in front of that lamp is that it just makes the beam parallel, so that it is better and more it's easier to articulate that light in terms of shaping it and cutting it. तो बांधो लगा। और वो diffusion change है। Now I'm just adding a softening diffusion material in front of the light and see the nature of the shadow of what happens to it. And also if you look this way, also if we just move this light a bit with the diffusion, just keep looking in one place. Just keep looking in front. So if you, between this, turn that way. Yeah, between this, where half is face is lit and half is in shadow, to a little more wrapped around feeling and a much softer shadow. Now, if I just move this diffusion material closer, the light wraps around it. So it's just very, very basic stuff, and also see what's happening to the shadow. It's still the same direction of light, it's the same source, and the quality of the light has changed dramatically. So if you just come closer, as see what's happening here. In fact, it's almost gone away. Now, if I were to move that side of the bed sheet even further in and even further in, no, it's gone away. This is not a magician's bed sheet, but what it is just to do is the basic and simple issues of light, which actually we spend a whole lifetime trying to. So if you're just aware of this much of the basics of the kind of light that you can for the rest of your life be a cameraman. Which is, I'm not being facile, because this is actually at the base of everything. And if lighting is the key means of expression that the cinematographer has, then this is basically what he plays with all the time. And now what meaning you attach to it, how you use it, how you use this to articulate various scenes or various texts, that is completely up to you. And I don't even think that there are any fixed codes, in the sense that, harsh light denotes something and soft light denotes something else. If you put diffusion in front, it starts to mean in a certain other way. That is completely for you to interpret. It is not for me to decide that these are the givens. So when you approach a film, again, if we are just talking about lighting, it is what quality of light, what direction of light, what intensity of light that you're using determines a lot of how the scene looks. So moving from this, utar lenge? I think, can we have some of the service lights on here? What I'm going to do is also just do, again, a very simple exercise through the day, which is to just play clips from 2 films that I have shortlisted. Come down. Just sit there. See what's happening now. So there are, and also I don't know if this projector is doing anything, but there is some blue light. So lights of various intensities from different directions up there, and you can observe what's happening in the shadow pattern. I've isolated 3 actually, coincidentally, they are songs, but I've isolated three scenes in Lagan, which all happen in the village square. All the scenes are set in the village square, and it is night time. But all the scenes are of a different, are in a different, have a different context, have a different mood, talk about a certain other kind of a thing within the film. There are, the first song appears at the beginning of the film. That song is called Mitwa, in which Bhuvan, who is the protagonist, is just trying to rustle up everybody. He goes to a person's home. That's where the song, the scene begins. Actually, he goes to a person's home and tries to persuade him to join the team or to come in and play cricket with him. So it starts in a realistic setting in the night when these guys have just sat down to dinner. It's like a family sitting down to dinner, and Bhuvan enters that space and starts speaking to the guy. And he moves that guy out of his home space into the village square, and it all becomes like a community participation of song and dance, whatever that means. And for me, the cues in this were that it starts in that sort of realistic setting, in that real sort of space, which is this guy's house, and it moves into song. So I took my cues from that scene and extended it into the song. Because for me that was actually the reality of that situation, you know. So it is, in a sense, it is directional light, but it is not very harsh directional light. It is a soft directional light, which is simulated from maybe lamps, which are typical in these houses, which are kept on the floor. So it's like at this level, the light comes from one side. And that is pretty much the pattern through the whole song. So see it, and then we'll move on to the next bit. So can we project this scene number 17, I think it is, no? Chapter 17 on the Lagan DVD. So in textbooks you'll find written in as source lighting. This discussion happened before we started shooting. It was with the director, and since it was a very hands-on creative kind of producer, it was also Amir who was entering this discussion. Typically between a cinematographer and a director is where you have these discussions. So on the one hand, Ashu was, he was, because he had written the film in such a realistic mode, and he didn't want any fancy frills to the way he was going to play the scenes out or the way the actors are going to be dressed. He was trying to tell me that the lighting cues or the way you light the film should also come from the reality of the situation, from the sources that exist in the village. To which I was saying that it is that will become a very limiting experience for this whole film. So I was trying to stretch that idiom a bit and trying to say that let the lighting be a little more expressive and come from the content of the scene or where it's positioned in the film and what it's supposed to do at that point. So I've done a mix of both in this film. It's not what I would call source lighting. It takes it further, because I feel that source lighting has serious limitations when it comes to the entire palette of the film. So in a sense, I feel that being such an expressive tool, lighting being such an expressive tool, that it should be used in various ways to convey different things at different times in the movie. So that's why I'm showing you these 3 night scenes, and then we can talk about the lighting after you've seen them. And I don't think we need to play the whole song. So once you've had enough, somebody has to say enough. About the film that you have, before I start explaining where I'm coming from, we can even do that right now.
My question was, you have actress, white actress, and you have Amir Khan, and in this film he's actually much darker than usual, made purposely. How did you handle both the different tones in the same shot, when they're in the same shot?
Actually, film does most of that work, you know. This film emulsions these days are very, we used Kodak, I used 100, I used 50D, I used a mix of emulsions on this. But my main daylight stock was 50D. So I used a fine grain, low speed stock for most of Lagan. And it also has 50D has a slightly flatter curve, so it's a little more desat. And also I didn't want any glass in front of the lens for Lagan because I wanted a crisper, cleaner image. So that was also one of the reasons why I decided to go with 50D over. Because if you use a tungsten balanced film, you invariably have to first put in an 85, which is just a color correction filter, and then. Now this one is not so much for lighting. Introduction of the protagonist, and the song itself is talking about the elements and basically trying to say what a kind of feisty kind of a girl she was, you know. So it's like just like an introduction to the protagonist. And it is, in a sense, complete, it's part of the idiom of the song and dance of the Indian film. But I think we've not treated it like that because the game forms the basis of the scene. So the typical choreography that you see in formation dancing and all that is not there. Like I was saying, this is, I mean, it's in a sense song and dance of the Hindi film in the and the you know how it works in that particular genre. But this one for me is different because it's the choreographer did come in with a set piece. You know, once a song is given to the choreographer, he or she sets the music to dance, and then it comes to the set with the dancers, with the choreographer, and then there is the whole business of filming it, which generally is a very elaborate setup of cranes, tracks, this, that, everything that goes into a Hindi film song. This one, I feel, takes all that out of it. It sort of strips it. And even the location. So let's, when you start with a location like this, which is just barren, arid land, firstly, arriving at that location was a huge discussion and a journey for us because it didn't start by being located here. It started by us looking for locations. So wherever we traveled, after we did the sets in Bombay, we traveled to scout for locations for this thing. And the usual, we went to Jaisalmer, Jaipur, etc., etc. And there were a lot of Havelis and structures which were supposed to tie up with the Haveli in which he lives, which we had built as a set. So there were various places at which we stopped and asked, is this where we should do this introduction song? And for some reason or another, or one of us, between the production designer, the cinematographer, and the director, some of us, one of us would have an issue with some kind of location. For example, in Jaisalmer, within enclosed walls, we thought about situating this game there, and I said that it would be too limiting. And finally, when we were scouting a Haveli in the later part of the film, there is a Haveli in which we do some singing where Salman learns to sing from the Guru and where the women come and dance during Karwa Chauth night. We had found a Haveli, and this is on that way. It's out of Bhuj. And when we stopped at this arid land and we said, shall we situate this piece here? It sort of came together for everyone, at that point. It's not easy to explain how these decisions are made, but I thought it was fascinating to just situate something, a song like this, which is so much about color and fire, in the middle of nowhere. Also that, like I was saying a little while earlier, when the choreography piece came in and it was like given to us, I still felt that because it had the structure of the game that we should break it down a bit and we should, get the energy of the game to dominate on the piece rather than just have a set choreographed piece, which is boys and girls dancing, which happens when you see the Radha Kaise Na Jale song in Lagan, you will see how typically boys and girls get into groups and do formation dancing. It works for that song, and for this one we were trying to break it. Although here the structure is very clear that there are two teams, there are the boys playing the girls, and the girls, among the girls there is this very fiery character who finally wins the game for them. Then the third thing about cinematography specific would be that again I don't think I used a crane or a track trolley in the song at all, which is almost like if you think song, it's a given. I mean, the production guy is giving that requirement even before you know it. Ke acha chalo, Jimmy Jib, crane, track, gana kar rahe. But this was not the case with this. The camera is on sticks almost all the time. Then if you look at the lensing within this piece, and that lensing also I arrived at, looking at the choreography. I said, now if this is a game, it's all about the speed and energy over here. Let's just do it very simply by using a long lens. So all the zip zap that happens in the song and the kind of running around that she does is accentuated by the fact that I'm using a long lens. So there's a lot of long lens. It is not only long lens. There's a lot of long lens for all the time to create that sense of energy in the game. There's also a lot of, always the editing will always help that. But it is punctuated by using a very wide lens. That suddenly when you want to open out and see where it is situated and what the context is, where they are playing, and the fact that it is situated against such a special kind of landscape, is the place where I use a completely wide lens and open it up completely. So it's like it alternates between long lensing and very wide lensing. And then when there are moments where the director wants to stay with a character, and because it's the introduction of the protagonist, he uses slow-mo. He uses slow-mo, or, I mean, it's always, these decisions are always collaborative. So there is, in between, there are slow-mo shots. Now, just, if you want, we could revisit the song and you see it from this point of view. One camera, no lights, one zoom lens, no camera mount. I mean, no camera not mounted on any mobile. Because some of the cues for this whole color treatment in the song came from, most of you are, I think, upset that it's excessive. Is that a right kind of feeling I'm getting? So because somebody said, how do you handle the problem of so many colors in a frame? It's not a problem for me. So the pastels that were going on to the dancers, a whole palette was brought in front of Sanjay on the set, and I remember it. And we went through it. So I said, yeah, this is a very good palette. And it will go with the set. Why I wanted to take you back to the set was that because there was a discussion around it. The first drawings, and I was not living in Bombay at that time, so the first drawings of the set came to me in Bangalore. And at that point, the floor was a Prussian blue with gold bordering, and there were hanging lamps with fire in them, from what I recall, and it was a long time ago. So I got back to Sanjay and I said, isn't it much too dramatic for this moment in the film, and for this particular scene? So that's where the discussion started. And then we took it further. And then when I came to Bombay, we went over this thing of, it's this song about, she calls him Nimbuda, and it's to do with this Nimbu, which appears in the song, funnily. So basically coming from that space, I said, let's not make it an over dramatic and a dramatically lit song. Let's just make it light-hearted and buoyant. So taking the cue from there, the colors of the set changed. The floor became a pink, pastel marble kind of flooring, which again comes from, I think, some of the Havelis in Rajasthan. Nitin brought in a reference for the flooring, and we said, yeah, that's good. The drapes changed into lime green and a lemon yellow. So that became the foreground fabric. So the whole texture of this set actually transformed through this process of discussion. Having done this, having brought, like I said again, like I was talking about the light earlier, having brought these colors into the foreground, then I said that at the back, behind the set actually, it's the cyclorama on the set, I said, let's paint that, don't leave it black. Make it a very saturated blue. It will contrast with this, and it will give me something at the back to see. It will just take my eye there too. So the very deep blue, which was actually first the main color on the floor, went into the cyclo, which is completely at the back. So this is, I'm just, whatever I'm recalling, I'm telling you now. But this is actually what I call the participative process. So whether I decided that all those costumes will be pastel, no. That pastel colors came. But because those pastel colors now flowed with the set, I said, damn good. Then they wanted to put all these shiny things on their dresses, which I said, what are you doing? Why are you putting all this tinsel? Not, what is it called? Those chum-chum, those shiny things on their turbans and all that. So Sanjay said, I love it. I said, okay, go with it. So it's like that, that's the... See, one thing about stock is that I feel in today's day and age, stock has become one platform. There are stocks with distinctive looks have gone out. So when you have Kodak developing a Vision 2 platform, it's a consistent platform. If you use a 200T Vision 2 and a 500T Vision 2, the chances are that they will cut together seamlessly. You won't even be able to tell. And this is something that we have been asking for. We have been saying, give us consistent stocks. And Kodak in between had introduced a stock called 320T, which they called stonewashed. So it was a low sat, it was like a desaturated kind of stock, which had a slightly flatter curve, which I would say that people would use that thing in a specific film. Today, when all these years we've been saying, why are the high-speed stocks so grainy? Today, I feel there is a need for a grainy stock. I want to shoot some sequences where film grain shows, because film grain has gone out of the window now. And I'm looking for that stock, but it's not there now. When it was there, we were complaining. When it's not there, also we are complaining. That's also a very typical trait of a cinematographer. As far as the look of stocks in the way I have chosen them over the films that I have done, yes, I have taken conscious decision to use certain kind of stocks for certain films. Like I said, for Lagan, my main stock was 50D. for the reasons that I explained that applied to Lagan. For this film, it was because it was a glamorous this thing. I wanted a fully saturated stock, so I was living with the 200T, if I'm not mistaken. Vision had maybe been introduced at that point in time. And for the interior night stuff, or for some very large sets, I was using the 500 stock, which is again full blown, has a good contrast curve, and has full blown colors. For a film like Agni Varsha, which was actually set somewhere in period and it had a very different look, I at that point asked for and used a 100 ASA stock called 5248, which was going out of fashion, which Kodak was going to start easing up on. But I wanted that slightly stronger contrast, a little more saturated colors, and a little more warm bias in the way it rendered those colors at that time. So yes, that is also one of the choices that a cinematographer makes, and I have been making them in my films. But today, like I was saying, with the changing environment, it's about digital intermediate. So most of the films that I'm shooting today are on DI, where I know that I can play with the characteristics of the stock in my luster grade, in my digital grade. So a little tweak of a button here and there and the entire response curve will change, the entire feeling of the color will change. I can separate black from, the background from the foreground. I can change my supplementaries versus my primaries. There's a lot I can do. So in today's day and age, stock choice, I would say more and more functional thing. In Humdil, actually, there's a much more effective shot of this water rippling when she slashes her wrist. So that's when it's really dramatic. And then we put a red curtain behind her and it was all underlit. So that is now not a glamorous portion of the film, and where the lighting is actually telling the story in a very different kind of way. And actually, talking of Humdil, in that water ripple thing, there is another shot when she has actually just, for the first time, gone up to Salman's room, sat with him, fed him some honey after feeding him chilies, and it's like a moment of a high when you're just, it's like the feeling of a kind of very romantic, your heart's kind of skipping a beat kind of feeling, where she comes down to be by herself, by the water. In the same location, very different time of the film, very different feeling, she comes and lies down by the same water. And in that, the water is completely still. And she touches the water, and the light breaks on her. So it's the same rippling, it's the same kind of light. The light is pumped into the water, and the water then starts to ripple. This time, from a very placid water, she touches it, and the ripples break. And it's a feeling of elation, it's a feeling of love, it's a feeling of romance. And in the same situation, with the same kind of love, with the same kind of light, it is a completely reversed feeling of, slashing your wrists or being like that. So what I was saying earlier about, not ascribing certain values or certain codes to lighting, not predetermining them, is also very important. It's how you interpret it for the moment, for that particular moment in the film. Actually, I've already spoken about the sequence, and we already discussed what we were going to do with this Lagan thing. So I'll just run these three things, and in this case, I don't know if we should run the entire song, but you see snips of these three situations in the night in the village. And also, if there is other stuff that you remember from this movie which you're keen to know something about, we could go back and watch that too. So let's just play this, Monica. This is that scene which begins with a dinner thing, and in a house where I said that the cues were coming from the lamps and lanterns, and the lighting is like that. It's all a little low key, and the song follows from this scene. In a sense, a very different looking film from the previous one. No complaints about excessive color here. It's just, it was a film which started on the premise of, of the sukha in the town, of arid land, and the whole deal was actually to do away with greens, and to a large extent, if we could, some of the blues. And that was the discussion in the prep stage. So already we were working towards it. And the film, later in post, to take that same discussion of the look further, I've also toned the film a bit in the post, in the grading of it, and given it just to accentuate this monochromatic treatment, which I used to also sometimes enhance by putting in a slightly warming filter, not any kind of diffusion or anything, but just a warming filter to make the browns a little more saturated, or sometimes just to give a little more feeling of red in the skin. and basically keeping a warm tone through the film. That's the parameter for the whole film. For this particular song, again, like I said, it started off with that scene, so you started off with a realistic, slightly more natural feel or a sourcey feel to the light. And then I just took that configuration and applied it to the song with maybe an addition of a kicker which is slightly cooler than the key light. So there's a consistent kicker which works through the song, which that cue actually comes from when the little boy and Amir are sitting on the roof, on the thatch roof, and there's that moon in the frame. So there, at that point, I've used a slightly strong kicker, and then that kicker sort of stays through the song. So it's a directional, not as soft as the Nimbuda song kind of lighting, but it is a slightly, and it is not as harsh as a naked lamp. It is a slightly softer version of a very directional key. So having started off with what you could call a typical source lighting setup, one has moved from there into just applying that source light. So it doesn't become faithful source lighting through all the shots of the song, but it becomes an application of that particular configuration through the song, which for me actually gives it a kind of consistency of look, which I feel also is important when it comes to giving films a look or giving scenes a look or holding a piece together. Because going all over the place with your light placement and also is a very distracting feeling for a viewer. And this makes it apparently more seamless, and you sort of travel with that space and time in a sort of more continuous kind of way. That's, in short, the look of this particular song. The director and the writer in this case, Ashutosh that is, he is also a very key factor in writing the movie, was actually very, very clear about each of his characters in this village, and particularly the people who constituted the team. He was clear to the extent that he knew in his head before the set was built where each one's house was in the village, who lived next to whom. Even if we didn't go to his house to shoot his scene, or if it was only in his head, it was in his head. That these guys are neighbors. These guys are neighbors who fight. That guy lives there. The Mukhiya's house is there. All this was, and that behind Bhuvan's house there is Khet. So all that, in a sense, firstly it was written into the script, and secondly he was very clear. I was not so clear because for me sometimes I would not even, that thing would not figure in the film, but it would be clear in his head. So when he was arranging his characters in the frame, he knew what prominence to give which character in which scene. So when there are 20 people standing in a frame, Ashutosh would very meticulously place those people within the frame after we had decided what the frame should be and what the frame should be doing. That's a deliberate shot of which is situated low angle to see, and it sort of moves away from the village and you see the stars. It's a very deliberate ploy. The rest of the time when you see the camera placement or you see the horizon, you actually see the horizon. So we were not worried about actually showing the stars till it became important in the text of the piece. I can't show the stars. Actually, with my film stock and with my camera, I cannot photograph the stars. So invariably they have to be pasted in post. Now if every shot I am going to paste a few stars, because near the horizon firstly you see less. If I am going to have to detail that, there are many considerations, and the first one is money. That we would go bonkers trying to pay for all those stars that we placed, which only you would have seen in the whole song. So where it became important, and when we did this low angle track into Amir and we showed Ambar hai, ye meri dharti hai, ye mera Ambar hai. So literally speaking, that's when we decided to paste them. And it's a pasted plate. I haven't shot the stars, they're generated. And they're digital pasting, compositing. And obviously they have been tracked. When the characters cross the light, there are shadows and there are slightly soft. So if it becomes very distracting for that particular shot, I might change the direction of the light a little, take it a little above that, or live with the fact that that interplay of shadows is looking interesting for me. No, I haven't used much ambient light in that. In fact, there's one shot in which Amir plays the Ravan Hatta only to Gauri, to Gracie. It's just the two of them isolated. And he plays one piece where he stands up and he plays the Ravan Hatta to Gracie, and it's a track shot. Why I remember there is not much ambient light is because Amir asked me, he said, "Samne se light nahi dena hai." So they get anxious when they don't see the lights coming on their faces. They do get anxious. But in this song, there's very little of that. Yeah, okay, this is one of the rare festive occasions in the film, which is If there is a lighter, more celebratory, festive kind of an occasion, it's this one in the film, for which Amir had a special kurta stitched. Otherwise, he was wearing the same bandi in the whole film. So, in a sense, similar space, which is the village square, but a very different feel of light. So again, some amount of discussion before we shot it. The director was not very convinced of how I wanted to treat it, and he said, "Okay, how can you have this kind of lighting in a village square at this time of the night and all that kind of thing?" I said it's more to do with the feeling of the piece. So anyway, I don't know whether now he likes it or not. The other story around this song was that once I had in my mind just thought of this scheme that I wanted again basically a soft light, and I didn't want, because I knew again it was a dance in a round similar to Nimbuda in a sense, uh, and the people standing all around, the village again wrapped all around you, except that this time now it's not on a studio floor, it's completely in the outdoors, where you don't have any advantage of overhead scaffoldings. You don't have all the advantages of being on a studio floor basically. But in a sense, the scheme was the same. So I wanted to have a slightly an overhead blanket of light, and to rig something like that up there in this space was never going to be possible. So the first thing that you think of, and those are fixtures that are available today, were the helium balloons. And the helium balloons at that point in Bombay were not available. There was one unit, it was only a 4K unit, so it was never going to be enough, and it was going to drive production up the wall with the cost. So we actually, I can use the word, invented an overhead rig to suspend soft globes of light. We got the local basket weavers there to build us some bamboo frames, large, about 3-foot bamboo frames, about 20 of them. We got the gaffer to just call up Bombay and to have some naked sun gun lamps, very basic filament lamps, which all the working lights. And when you go outdoors in this, even in this festival compound, you'll see all that flood lighting in the garden is done with those tubes. And we got him to rig those tubes into this bamboo framework, which is basically looks like a globe, like a Chinese lantern. The cue is the same. It's just a large Chinese lantern with a lot more power and punch put into it. And then a steel cabling network on top to suspend these things, which was anchored on bamboos which could form part of the set. And those bamboos could then be dressed with marigold flowers and some decorative fabric to be part of the set. So when you see the top angle shots, there are shadows because there are multiple light sources, because there are all these balloons hanging there. But they are very soft sources. They are very soft shadows. Which again, I mean, if you argue strictly from the point of view of source lighting and realistic treatment and all that, it's actually taking a huge leap. But like I said before, it is what I feel the light should be for this particular moment in the film, for this particular sequence. Also, I remember using, I think this is one of the rare sequences in the film where I used a diffusion. Again, for the specific purpose of, because it is a softer moment, because it is about now Gracie and about the character Gauri and the way she's feeling, and this. So there's a light gold diffusion. Now the decision to use a gold diffusion, which is more towards yellow, rather than, let's say, a magenta or a red or a whatever, or a pink, was also then comes from the kind of costuming and the kind of decoration there is. There are marigold flowers, he's wearing a yellow kurta, it is about Radha Krishan, it's about, the whole ambience is like that. So there is a certain warm filtration and some amount of diffusion on the camera for one of the rare moments in the film. So it's, again, I mean, I'm just taking you through the decisions that a cinematographer makes when he is working on a film. And again, there is light from the ground, but it is again a very soft source, and it wraps around much more, and there is much more, like in Mitwa, one side of the face was very dark. This time, it's not so dark at all. There is a darker side of the face, but it's much better lit. Suspended over the dancing area, so in that area of whatever 40 feet by 40 feet, that round, and there is a huge fall off, not a huge fall off, a gentle fall off of these lights onto the people who are standing on the bullock carts or sitting on the carts or just standing around and watching. So the same light source actually then diffuses and spreads over this large area which forms a center. Now, having done this for the center, there is huge amounts of work to be done in the village. Every house, if you're seeing a DVD, but if you see the film, you will see, and if you look only at the back, which you don't do in this song, you will see that every house has some amount of light on it. Again, in a sense, similar principle to Nimbuda, where at the back the set is got illuminated with patches of light. Like you can see the temple, which is like, what, more than 500 yards or 600 yards away, also lit with small patches of light. All those, then it's now somebody was asking about concealing lights from the floor. Those are all concealed. It's all in the open. So it's all concealed lights. All, if you were to ask me, those lights would be in your shot, but you don't see them because they're concealed either by a prop or by a person or just by blackening that area out. There's another song that comes towards the end of the film, which is when all is lost. In fact, that scene was written in as, I think, gloom or something. So when you have a scene that is written in as gloom, then obviously you start thinking of light very differently. Yeah, actually, I've already said this, that same space, different point in the movie, different kind of scene, and a different kind of light, and a different kind of arrangement of characters and different kind of feeling. So maybe what I'm saying is that, it's I don't really get into this thing of realistic sources and source lighting as much as I get into what the light should be talking about at that point in time in that particular scene. So because this whole arrangement of figures and people was in sort of this kind of a format, if the temple is behind me, then the entire village and the village square spread out in front of us. There was a whole array of towers, scaffoldings built on the right side, if the temple is behind me, on which were large strong units of light, but all naked. No diffusion on the lights and just coming straight down onto these guys. So all the shadows are much harsher, the quality of light is harsher, and the texture on the skin is therefore that much clearer. And on DVD you can't distinguish that much because it tends to soften the image in any case. But that was the quality of the light. And if you see a good film print, you will see the subtle differences in softness over these. How long it took? Probably 2 days. Yeah. And Aishwarya Rai would be ready only by 11:30 every morning. So shall we play it again? We would be there at 7, but she would come out of the trailer at 11. I mean, okay, 10:30. Yeah, I mean, we can just play it so that they can now view it. This is this is a tracking shot of a car. The camera is on a car, in the side of a Maruti van, and I think only for this shot. The same vehicle, that chakra which was carrying all of them, the camera is on that chakra, and we just did this close up. The wide lens, back to the telly, back to the wide. It's pretty elementary actually. No, that's from just a height. I mean, we just built a kind of scaffolding and we placed the camera on it. You're talking about crowd, which is part of the shot. So look at it in this song and tell me there are people at the back. How is it done? All those elements. It's costuming. Sometimes it's lighting. In this case, because you're in the open air, it's not so much about lighting because it's like a uniform light all over the place. It's about just sometimes lensing and therefore foregrounding. Or when you compress, like you use a long lens, you've got selective focus. So you've lost a lot of depth, and therefore your camera is focusing on the plane that you want to emphasize. So all those elements come into play. If there were scenes like that, I could speak about them. I mean, it is one of the ways to do it. It is not probably the best solution. Is to that if this is my heroine, I will put only one light on the heroine and forget about the rest of the set, and therefore she will stand out. Not necessarily the right approach. All these things, long lenses come with all these characteristics of having shallow depth. And also then when I move the camera, which means when I pan it, I get a sense of blurring, which gives me a sense of hectic movement, which gives me a sense of energy. The slow motion, like I said, is interspersed in this whole piece to actually punctuate it, to highlight again, basically to create this slightly heightened feeling or the heightened presentation of this particular character.
No, was it visualized for these sequences or was it later on? I mean,
No. It was done in camera.
in camera.
Everything is done there on the spot.
Okay.
There is no post in this song.
A general question: when you're shooting songs, where there's maybe where there's intricate choreography, what is the order? Like, I mean, who decides how the shots will look like? Does the choreographer first tell you what the steps will be, and then you decide what's
Yeah.
tracking or like?
No, so like I was saying, that typically when a song is composed from the music room, it comes to the director after the song is finally on disc, on a CD. Typically a director would call in a choreographer, give her or him a brief as to what he wants with that song, what the situation within the film is, and the choreographer obviously has a sense of context of the script and all that. And then leaves the choreographer to find the moves for that piece, appropriate to the film. And the director would revisit that space and go and see the choreography and make his comments about whether it is good or not good. In Sanjay's case, very often I would go along with him whenever he went to the rehearsal space. So some amount of the visualization would happen when you see the choreography. Some part of the visualization will happen when you reach the set. In this case, like I was telling you, what happened is that it was set as a choreographed piece completely in a rehearsal hall. But when we brought it onto location and when this thing started playing itself out, for me at least, the whole energy of the game was so much more vital to the script and vital to this piece, that I said that we should shed some of those typical dance gestures and make it more part of, like everyday action, and let them play the game. But if you look at the game, it is very carefully choreographed. If you look at every shot, it is very closely choreographed. So even when she takes the ball and goes and takes her position, when she walks and she turns to face the 7 tiles, it's a dance move. But it's, what is it? In real terms, it's a person who has walked to his mark, turned around and taken a position. So there is choreography and there is a sense of dance to the whole piece. There is a sense of choreography to the cinematography, which follows from what he's seeing in terms of the action. And yet there is a feeling of a real game being played, a sense of a real space and a sense of a real person. That follows from the music, It's very difficult to explain what comes first, And it's also very difficult to explain whether, you can pre-decide a camera move. Okay, in this song, I'm going to move the camera like that. Very often it happens after listening to the music. And sometimes it can happen on set, I mean, I recall a time when we were saying, okay, just this music piece, what should we do? And one of us must have said, okay, let's just do a track into the character here. And when the music played and I did that track in, I said, let's look at a track out. Same track, I said, it just feels like with this piece of music that if I did this, it might work better. You do that right on the spot, director says, yeah, looks better, or says, can it, and go back to the track in. So these are things which are very difficult to quantify. But yes, I can tell you broadly the kind of, and I'm speaking only from a practical perspective. I'm not speaking from a theoretical perspective. So I will be telling you things that happened between, let's say, Vaibhavi, Sanjay, and I on this song. It is a collaborative process, and if the director, actually, it is also the director's prerogative of how collaborative he wants to make it, how much he wants to bring in a particular person. I mean, a choreographer can have a say on the costume. Because if she has seen it in a certain flowing sort of manner, she might say, okay, give her a skirt which is made in Malmal, which has 10 yards of ghera, I can use it. Let's give this guy a cape so that when they do those kind of moves, and the director can take a call whether he wants to go that route or not, So even in costuming, because it forms a part of the color palette of the film, yes, the cinematographer is called in, yes, his comment is necessary, but it's not binding on the director, or it's not always the case that a cinematographer does it. Very often a cinematographer lands up on the set and shoots the film. And he's told, acha chalo, let's shoot this sequence today. Yeah, shoot the sequence today. Let's shoot it like this, shoot it like that. That also happens. It's also a valid form of interacting, of making a movie. This is all available in ambient light. So the shadows are there. When you look at the top angle shot, which is very wide, and you see when you see the game being played out, all the characters, you see shadows. Those are like 4:30 shadows.
But yeah, when you say Aishwarya Rai came out 11:30, and that was like peak noon time.
You're talking about shadows on her face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So see, even it was probably winter months, so I can always, and because it's a neutral landscape, I can cheat the axis pretty easily. In the sense that if I turn around and look this way, in a salt pan, it will look the same if I turn and look this way. So for the close-ups, I would take that care and make sure that she was not standing in frontal top light. which is probably not so flattering for her at that point in time, and for this particular film. Because it was slow-mo and we had to, we had to go with her, We wanted her to do that whole thing in one shot. We wanted her to run. We wanted to climb on the chakra all in one shot. Because that actually is also, if you listen to the song, that's what it's talking about, that this girl has this kind of temperament, So it's more like moving with a character in slow motion. If I had done it to the pan, I would probably have gone into her back by the time she got there. So it came from the move, that this is what she was going to do. She was going to take so many paces to catch up with the chakra. This was also the length of the shot determined by the music that we want to cover. So the track shot seems to be the logical way to cover it. But again, the means were very improvised. The Maruti van opened the side door, plonk the camera and just shoot it. And because it was high speed, I was not so worried about, because all that softens out a bit when you do high speed. It's the difference between standing in one place and using a long lens and a wide lens, and the other is to physically come closer to you. That's the difference. And then if you start looking for those shots in the films, you will see how visually they are different.
Yeah, I just want to know, what do you think would have been different if you would have shot this sequence as purely a game sequence without the little bit theatrical movements, and how would you have shot it then? To still
that, then you will have to tell me, because then you would have directed the piece and I will ask you these questions.
Okay.
Because that's a new movie. So the next piece from Humdil is, I think it's a scene. It's a confrontation scene between the mother and this thing. Again, I think it's interspersed between a song. What has happened is that this boy has come to her house and they've sort of fallen in love, but obviously they cannot meet. So this whole parting is taking place. The boy is being told to leave the house, and it's a pretty dramatic moment in their lives. And her shadi has been fixed elsewhere. So at that point, this scene comes in where her mother comes to her room and asks her what has been going on between you and this boy. And like I said before, it's part of the song. So so should we just see that clip? Also in Humdil, broadly speaking, there were a lot of. No, this is okay. Should we just? Okay, let's just see this also. This is not what I was talking about. This is like, the equivalent of a Sangeet. Nobody has Sangeet like this, but anyway, this is the Sangeet in the film. So there's this whole song thing preceding a shadi that is going to take place in this large household. So this is a very kind of a buoyant, happy moment in the whole family. Everybody is gathered to watch this dance. And this man has entered this space for the first time. Again, I don't want you to get carried away by what she's wearing, but just remember that we switched on that baby in the morning. I want you to look at the kind of light there is, and I want you to look at where the shadows are falling, and then we can talk about it. Okay, first the situation in the film. So there's this leading lady, or whatever you want to call her, the protagonist of the film, who is actually thinking about or has just about started to fall in love with that character that you see sitting in that room, which is Salman. And there is Ajay, who is just entered their space, come to their home, and is getting mesmerized by what he sees. And of course, the third thing is that there's this huge occasion in the family, which is this large shadi, and therefore all the pomp and glamour. Now that is the given within the script. And so we are setting out to achieve that. Then we have now the reality of the situation. We have a studio, a very large studio, Mehboob Studio, in which the art director has built a set which wraps around you. If this is the studio, and if you can imagine the studio, the set is all around you. So you walk into the space and you're in the set. So it's like a wraparound set. And you know that you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be filming this song. And the center space is, as you saw it, is like a stage space, a performing space. And it's going to be like a 360-degree choreography. And you're come in on day one and you're expected to light this piece and shoot it over the next 6 days. So these are all the givens where about this piece. Now, if you just go back to, can we just turn this? Then he'll have to re-cue the DVD. Yeah, if you just recall what you did in the morning, when the light first came on from a distance, when it was specular and it was coming through the lens and the nature of the shadow, and then when we brought the bed sheet close to the guy, how the shadow completely went away. So now, like I was saying, that if in this 360 rap choreography and the 360 rap set kind of situation, I knew that I would have very little floor space to work with. Also, given the fact that it had to be this highly colorful, glamorous, and it had to be about this glowing beauty, which is not so difficult when it's Aishwarya. That the lighting had to have a certain character, and it had to evoke the same feeling. So. If that set, if the dance floor was like a 50 by 50 feet area or a 30 feet by whatever it was, my first decision was to build an equal size soft box on top, the equivalent of what you saw with one light and a bed sheet here. So like a 50 by 50 frame with diffusion material in it strung on top of this dance floor. So when you see the top angle shots and when you see the wide shots of this song, there are very, very soft shadows. If you look for them, they're there, but actually if at a first glance, the shadows are not even there. With so many people on that floor, with so many dancers on that floor, to have a kind of just basically a suffusion of light was achieved by doing just that. Just very basically that. Everything else on the set then was picked up with small units and, the texture on the pillars, the texture on the fabric which forms the background. And in those, and where the crowd stands in the round, and behind the crowd where there is a wraparound cyclorama which is very, very deep blue, which is like a night blue black. All those things then I picked up with, slightly more isolated and slightly more specular patches of light to create again a sense of depth and also to change the character of the lighting, not to have this flat light just spill over the whole thing. So it creates a certain sense of texture, a certain sense of depth, a certain sense of articulation over all the elements that are there on the set. That was basically the approach. There is some stuff that comes from the ground also, but very little for the dancers. I don't have any problems with excessive color. That's a personal choice. You want to put lots of color in your film, you put it. You don't want it, take it out. I mean, you take it out by means of costuming, you take it out by means of, sometimes by, today you can do it in post. You can desaturate your look. You can do it by selection of emulsion. I did, like this, this softbox that you saw in the morning. I did have another 12 by 12 frame which was floating around on the ground, which was not necessarily where I was, but it could have been there and could have been there. There is one moment in this song where, she obviously she's thinking about this guy in the room, this guy is thinking about her, and that's what it's about. And there is one point where she sort of is doing this very gay number and she sort of just breaks away and she comes to a corner to wipe a tear. And that's probably the only shot in this whole song which has some amount of contrast on her face. Otherwise, she's very evenly lit and very softly lit. And from that particular close-up, we cut to Salman in the room and he is sitting in a similar kind of light. So it's just that one moment where she breaks away. So again, it's like the feeling being articulated by, or that transition being articulated by the nature of light and the quality of light.
In this song, you didn't have a lot of ground units, but if you had a song with where the lighting changes and it's 360 degrees and you have to hide the lights all the time, how do you get continuity of f-stop, or do you change the f-stop and do you refer to previous shots, or how do you figure that out?
This is another movie. I would obviously find the solutions depending on the problems presented there. But if you're talking about within the space, you can suspend lights above the camera. You have various ways of rigging lights by which you can conceal them. Sometimes you can use the architecture of the set to conceal your lights, so it could all come from the floor equally. About continuity of f-stop, I'm not a stickler for continuity of f-stop. And I don't really know what that achieves, because I've always struggled to find an answer for that one. When I read that cinematographers shoot the whole film on 4.5, I really don't know what it achieves. So there are some shots where you want to lose depth, so you might want to put in an N9 and lose your depth. You might want to put in some neutral density filters and lose the f-stop for particular scenes, for particular shots. And yet you might want to regain it soon enough. You put it on a wide lens and put on a lot of aperture on it and put a 22, you want to use it. So in my mind, I have never been a stickler for maintaining f-stop. But if you're talking about, yes, continuity of lighting with light units placed on the ground in a situation which is a wraparound situation, I might not decide to do that movie. I mean, but you have to, it's like problem solving, you know, you problem solve on the spot and you improvise on the spot, and there are ways of doing it. There are times when you have lightmen carrying a light behind you. There are guys who, after you have tracked back, somebody has moved some of the gear which was going to come into shot. So all kinds of solutions. Because it's a hypothetical question, I really can't, say much about it. But yes, you have to find solutions all the time in cinematography, and they are very practical solutions that you have to find. So it's not just about ideas and words, it's about a lot of work on the ground. See, I was saying that there is a whole range of, you can walk into a set, the choreographer has finished his choreography, the director has not come for the shoot. That thing happens in our films. Because the choreographer is going to direct the song and knows the choreography, the director may not land up. So that level of communication is also there, or lack of communication is also there. And there are other sets or other films, like in this one, like I was talking about, a very close collaboration between what the choreographer is doing, and because the director himself is so intrinsically involved with choreography and has so much of choreography in his head, that he is first very, very participative in that process and wants to incorporate the cinematographer into that process of shot design, of how to film this, of how should we break it down. So Sanjay, specifically speaking, again, because again this hypothetical thing, can go on, like I'm saying, there's the whole arc. But Sanjay in this case, first will work very closely with Saroj, give her a brief, go and see her rehearsals, change things around drastically. When it comes on set, again things might change, because how the choreo looks on the set will introduce some changes. Then how the cinematographer decides, and he might give you a loose description of the shot, that let's do this in, you put the camera in the center and do a circular pan with this thing going, with all the dancers going around them. And then the cinematographer might improvise on that and say, okay, we'll do this, but what about if we combine it with this movement, And then maybe that camera move might alter the choreography a bit. So it is a very, very participative process if you want it to be, and in this case it was. For example, there is one shot, again, where the song slows down a lot, and it moves away from this very central, all the dancers kind of choreography into a very personal space, where it's just a very slow tracking shot. When Ajay steps onto the platform, and she wraps herself in a curtain and comes out of it. If you look at that shot, it's a very slow, long, lingering shot without any of the impact or the effect of 40 dancers dancing behind her, which is the body of the song. So that kind of shot actually comes mainly from Sanjay, from the director, where he knows that this is the moment he wants to invest with the actor, with the character of the film, and he wants this moment to be quiet, he wants it to be special. So the camera move, the choreography, then he will take Saroj into that space, and then he will say, okay, now I have worked out this move with the actor. Now just give me one layer of girls in the foreground just wiping the camera as the camera slowly tracks. So if you look at that shot again, it's got that quality. For me, when I'm just driving in the street or sitting in this thing, and what I'm looking out of the window and seeing what's happening in the shop window, or the kind of fixtures that there are in the shop window, all that also influences me.
No, not really.
And I think it's a sum total of all what you have taken in. It's all the films that you have watched, all the paintings and all the paintings that you have seen. But it is not a conscious effort on my part to transcribe one school or the other into this. A soft suffusion of lights will come from, I could say, impressionist painting and all that, but it's not really, that's not what it's about. It's not a direct translation is what I'm trying to say. The costuming was, like I said, it's, firstly it's a celebration song. Okay, let me not talk about costuming here, but let me talk about set design. I mean, these three scenes. They are naked lamps and they are power cans, which are arranged in an array. So those lights are called dinos or dinos. They have a very, basically the unit is similar in the sense it's specular, but the shadow pattern is not so clean because it doesn't have a Fresnel lens in it, but it has a lot of punch, so it gets thrown over a long distance and retains its intensity at that long distance. So I needed very long throw lights. So I could have done it by similar to the baby that we saw, similar to that, but I would need many more units. So I prefer to use a less, in a sense, less clean light. But because it gave me the efficiency of power, they were all just slapped on from one side. Everything on this set, particularly with Lagan, was done manually, was done with just ropes and ladders. So like the rigging of the bamboo baskets, the mounting of these dinos on these rostrums, was all physical labor. There are no remote heads. All the track trolley and crane shots in this film are of an Indian kind of configuration, not even a sophisticated crane. It's the cranes that we fabricate in Madras. So all the, I think it's in this song, the camera starts on one side and wraps around another side, cranes down, is all on a manual crane which is built in this country. So it's not the best balanced crane, it is not the best place to sit in. Also, for the first time, we were using a 535. I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of cameras that Arri makes, but we were doing sync sound on this film, so we needed a quiet camera. And a 535 actually is a very awkward design. It is for that reason that they've discontinued it now. But first they slap it on us and then they take it back. So 535 is actually designed like this. So when you're sitting on a crane and operating, and I remember in this particular song, some places I was actually operating the camera by the handles which are on top of the magazine on the head, and the magazine was in my belly. So I was operating not with a panning rod sitting like this, like you see pictures of DPs, standing like this, looking through the long eyepiece. It was all in my stomach and I was all over the place. There's a vertical top shot in the beginning of this film. It's a vertical top. The camera is looking down like this. And with the 535, that again is not an easy thing to do with on a manual crane. Because all the load then goes in front, That was also physically done and manually operated. There were no Jimmy Jibs and no remote heads on this movie. I was saying a little while earlier that you can't really tell the subtle differences in the quality of the softness, because to begin with it's a DVD. The light in Opal and Hare is much harsher than it is in Mitwa. It is directional and it is half-half, yes, but it is much harsher. You will see that in the nature of the shadows. Also that in Mitwa there is a kicker, like I was saying a little while ago, which came from the queue of the moon, which has a little bit of blue in it, which tends to separate. Here there is a zero kicker. It is just one light. It is not one light, it's a lot of lights, but it's just that feeling. That cuts across you and it gives you, it's like a physical description of a light, It's like it's slapping you, it's coming slap on. There are scenes in these movies which you could go back to and see, and the same things that I'm saying about these songs. Actually, that's why I'm saying that maybe that is one of the good points, that they are all songs, but they all have different feelings, and they are different qualities of the way the cinematographer has approached them. So the same principles actually apply to the scenes. There is a scene in Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam in which, I was talking about that a little while ago, which comes in the middle of a song where Aishwarya is confronting her mother and saying that, I love this guy and why are you putting me into this marriage and it's never going to work and you're like, it's going to be a disaster from now on. And she's really hyper and very, very hysterical at that point. And that point, the light, in a sense, I could say, is similar to what you saw in Mitwa. In Opal and Hare, in this song, in the bhajan. It's really harsh. For a film that asked of the cinematographer to treat that the leading lady in a certain manner, and to have that glamorous look through the film, the decision to go with a naked light and to show all the textures on her face and not worry about them and to have very deep shadows is also a risky call, which the director may or may not agree with, because he is very clear that he is making this film and it has to have a certain look, and that look is first and foremost a glamorous look, and then he has a glamorous heroine. So you approach that scene with a lighting that doesn't live up to this mandate is not necessarily the correct direction to go. Chale Chalo is shot through the day. Some sections of the song may be early morning and some maybe, but we shot pretty much. And now there I am using the harsh sunlight to effect. In fact, that's one scene. If in a typical Lagan scene, I would be using like a large soft white bed sheet as a fill light. In this, I was using naked reflectors, So I was using harsher light, basically, even as my fill light. And I did not mind shooting Chale Chalo. You're talking about that whole preparation song, no? And there I didn't mind using using the top light and let it fall on the actors any which way. I was not looking for that backlight which I was looking for when I was doing that Aishwarya song in the outdoors. So it's a very different kind of preoccupation when I was doing Chale Chalo. In fact, the camera moves in Chale Chalo, the compositions in Chale Chalo are very different. Now there, lighting is not playing that important a role, but lighting is, yes, whatever daylight is available, I'm using it in a different way. And the fact that I'm using, including camera move and composition in a very different way from, let's say, O Palan Hare or even Radha Kaise Na Jale. So a lot of snap zooming in that. There's lots of hectic stuff in that song. So the language and the grammar of the way you're filming that piece again has changed. Chand Chupa. There is no chroma in that. That's an enclosed space. It's in a studio. In fact, it is on the same floor as we shot Nimbuda. So that set was built. Yes, it looks similar to the structure on the location, and it was replicated here. So the chat that they go to of the Haveli in outside Bhuj, wherever that is, was replicated here. So that there's I think a lot of stuff on the set, but I don't recall putting in stars over there. Yeah, if there is a starlit skyscape, then it has been put in. Yeah, there is another starlit scene in Hum Dil De Chuke Sunam when it's not a song, it is a scene in which Aishwarya and Salman meet on the terrace and he reads her foot. Yeah, in that scene there's stars and there's shooting stars and it's very badly done and it's digital post. That was those were early years of digital post. And that particular scene is shot on location and it was shot at night, so it's an open sky and it's black. And at best, I mean, they might have to roto it, which means take the characters and just draw a mask around them. If it is not keying out, if your black is not keying out, if your characters are not keying out properly, they just touch up the edges. Clouds coming and going is a digital composite. Opening song of Lagan has this thing of the clouds appearing. So we have shot, see, it's completely, I mean, firstly, it's impossible to wait for clouds in Bhuj. So although we did have bad weather in Bhuj, bad weather and films also go together. That's another given. So if there is a scene that you have to finish in one day, you can be sure that you'll have three kinds of light. You'll get a cloud cover, you'll get an open light, and you'll get late evening. So about this particular song, we did shoot some cloud samples which the post house used to generate their own clouds, but at the end of the day they are generated clouds with information that we have fed them or the information that they have downloaded or they have shot, whatever. Whenever a 3D guy is working, the best way the 3D guy would do would work is to first get the real information, see how it works, and then try and approximate it, like they do now motion studies when they do animation films and things like that. So the clouds have been pasted on, which was easy to do because we had decided that there were some long shots and there were going to be static shots of the landscape in which we would see these things. And we kept them static so that the movement of the clouds became apparent and also the paste became simpler to do. But having done that, having had that, that thing sorted, we did have this issue of what happens when the clouds have covered the landscape and the characters are still in the middle of the village square and dancing or whatever, doing whatever they have to do. And I was asked by the director and the producer, कुछ exposure से नहीं कर सकते हो? Because in Bhuj, like I said, you cannot wait for the clouds. We would be waiting for 6 months and we may or may not have got them. So first I was very surprised that I was getting this question from them because I thought they were, visually literate people. But yeah, I had to deal with it and there were meetings around it. Because it was a big production nightmare on how to organize this cloud cover for this song on those 3 days or 5 days that we are going to shoot that song. The gaffer also came up with his own invention on this case. In this case, he built a mile-long cloth. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, but it looked like that. I never went close to it. I used to see it in the landscape. When it used to travel, it used to be like a white centipede being carried by 50 people. I think if you watch Chale Chalo, you might see some shots of it. So the gaffer decided that this was the solution. He was going to cover the village in white cloth. I said, okay, let's try that. So a rigging team and this white cloth and the rostrums went up on this fateful day, and a light breeze started up. Now what happens when you have a mile-long cloth stretched across a village with a light breeze flowing across the landscape? You can lift the whole village with that breeze. So as they were pulling the cloth up onto the scaffoldings, first the cloth started to tear at the seams because it was so heavy, and second that this light breeze suddenly went to someone's ear and he said, hold it, ये अभी disaster हो सकता है इसके लेके. People will fly with that cloth, rostrums will fly with that cloth, everything will, be torn apart. So that cloth came down, the cloth was nixed. More production meetings. शाम को बैठो डिस्कस करो कि कुछ एक्सपोजर में नहीं हो सकता है क्या? So there I actually got quite irritated and adamant, and I said, okay, this thing is about the clouds coming. This thing is talking about the quality of light. This thing is talking about that there cannot be any shadows on the ground when you have got a cloud cover over the entire village. So the solution was that we will wait for sundown, and we will shoot magic hour when there are no shadows of these things. Now post sundown and between dark, there are 20 minutes. Or 15 minutes, or whatever. So more meetings. Then we said, okay, we will do this section. Since it is only one part of the song, it was agreed that we will do it at that point in time. Now I was very anxious that, post sunset, you can get any kind of color temperature in the sky, depending on that particular day, on the kind of sunset, on the kind of atmospherics, the kind of clouds in the sky. Actually, fortunately for me, the Bhuj sky is very neutral, very dead kind of sky. It doesn't become dramatic like a Bombay monsoon sky will become at sunset on the rare sunny day. So I was fortunate to get neutral colors when the sun went down. In fact, when the sun went down in Bhuj, it became bleak. It did not become that warm like you're used to seeing a sunset. So with that bleak light, I was able to spend those 20 minutes. So we would spend post lunch just rehearsing the shot, and we would spend sundown to dark to when I would say it's not possible to shoot anymore. We would use that time to do the overcast sections of that song. And if you now look at that song and see the choreo in those parts, all the choreography has been designed in lengthy takes, in lengthy shots, long shots, in terms of covering the action within one. So we would lay elaborate trolleys, do all the choreo rehearsals, get all these non-dancing actors to start dancing. We would do all that, and then as soon as the sun went down, we would shoot that thing, and over 2 or 3 evenings like that, we managed to can the overcast section of the song. I think this whole business of how a cinematographer works is, I hope it's coming home to you guys, that it's not just about, wearing a meter or knowing your stocks or knowing your camera. It's much more than that. And that's something that I keep emphasizing. If there are people who are, going to become professionals, is this whole thing about thinking on the spot, thinking of the solutions in the situation that you're in, and coming up with solutions real quick and real practical. I do not quarrel with the fact that if a song has to travel to a foreign locale on the drop of a hat, then so be it. These are leaps of faith that the Indian audiences make and want to make. So for a Western sensibility, it might be a huge problematic, but I think in our context, everybody accepts the fact that we have gone for a song to a fantastic location, and thank you so much for it. So I really don't have a quarrel with it, but yes, that whole emphasis is changing. People are looking at the films differently. People are expecting different things of our movies now. The filmmaker sensibilities are changing. Between Humdil and now, you're right, there is a change of that sensibility. And I see it in the work that the directors. So the next best thing is that the director says, okay, this whole film is set in New York. I have done 2 films where I was stationed in New York for, months on end in very bad weather. So again, basically just lit for drama, I mean, it is hysterically dramatic. So it is lit in that manner, unlike Nimbuda, and the fact that, the scenes effect on you and the effect on an audience when they're watching this film is very different. So, so let's not go by the way we are reacting to this, but it is a very, very, very high drama point in the movie, and the fact that Sanjay insisted that she fall back on the swing and her head hang down, and then she just lets loose over there. All those things, I mean, the way the shot is conceived actually gives you the cues of what you want to do now, you know. I mean, he's not having her in any kind of pleasant, reflective pose and that kind of thing. So when the treatment of the scene emerges from the director, you are also interpreting it. So even now, actually, even in DVD, you can see that I am not concerned with all the, which I would be in a film like this, you know, with all the pimples or her under eyes and things like that. But in this case, her forehead is full of pimples, and it doesn't matter to me. When she actually does yahan chua hai, yahan chua hai, yahan chua hai, I am only looking at the pimples. Background is I think basically again lots of babies, snoots and little patches of light. Very dark at the back. Again just for drama. Just to make it more and more dramatic. On this film, I mean I don't really recall and I also don't recall from this screening what you're talking about. But on this film I was using quite a lot of diffusion. There is a chance that there is a light, a very light promist on this thing. So while the light is harsh, I was still all through the film, again for consistency of look, I was using some nature of diffusion. And it's possible that if a light source or even if something glowing is there in the frame, it will have a slight halo around. You know, I know that you guys are, I mean, coming from lots of varied backgrounds here, but if there is, if there is still, and also that, you know, it's very difficult to pitch a talk or this kind of an interaction in a mixed lot. So I really don't know whether, that's why I chose to speak not in the abstract or, you know, just to also refer to stuff and images that you know and see and how you react to them and how I react to them or how I, help in making them. But I do have 2 DVDs which are actually, in my opinion, masterclasses. One is of a black and white period film called Sunrise, which is a German expressionist kind of a director who came to Hollywood to do films. And on that DVD is a commentary by a contemporary cinematographer. And he talks about, Bailey, yeah. Huh? The commentary, I think, is by Bailey. Anyway, it's here. What I'm going to suggest to Monica is that if you guys are interested and if you can make the time, it is the commentary is by John Bailey, who is a contemporary cinematographer in Hollywood, and the film was shot by Murnau is the director, and it was shot by a German and an American cinematographer. So it's an interesting mix. It was literally like expressionism coming to Hollywood and what they did with it and what they made of it, and the German lighting cameraman, and now you have a cinematographer talking about that work, you know, and black and white is probably the best way to watch cinematography and reflect on it. Also, I've requested Kodak to give me a DVD which is just come out. In fact, they're having some screenings of it in Bombay, which has shot on film about 100 cinematographers working in America today and their views and how they came into this thing. So it's just a series of interviews shot by cinematographers talking about their work. And that's, I think, more than an hour long. So these are according to me master classes, you know, not one guy standing here and trying to. So if any of you are interested and you can coordinate this with Monica, these DVDs are here, we can have a screening of them. Talking about Aishwarya's performance, Aishwarya has always been under this big cloud of this girl is not an actress. This is probably one film in which they let her go. This is one film in which they say, अच्छा चलो वो एक था, एक performance किया उसने हम दिल में. So I'm looking at it for the overall film thing. I'm not looking at it as a scene. And I think there also, I mean, speaking maybe selfishly as a cinematographer, the cinematographer and obviously, and of course the director comes first. But there is this whole team and this collaborative, what I was talking about earlier, that does inform, including things like performance. So the fact that Ash has a presence in this film which is different from or perceived differently by larger audiences is, I think, something, it says something about the film, on the way it came together. And no, I don't feel let down by bad performances. Like I said, I built that whole, basically it was a big light box on top which the set was lit. I had to say lights on and I could go. There are, in Nimbuda, there are, and I'm talking now about a huge light source on the ceiling. It's like, imagine this entire ceiling of this room were like one bank of tube lights. And then if I had to shoot, I would just place my camera anywhere and shoot. Which is like the lighting in, what is that film about that Deep Throat and those two reporters in All the President's Men was lit by a series of tube lights. And I'm just making a reference so that you can imagine it. And then you can just go, and there are huge tracking shots, Steadicam shots in that space, like a film like Shining. The whole set was lit with the practicals, the banks were put outside the windows, and then you could just freely travel. So lighting design, if you know and you have that privilege of sitting with the director and having an articulate director explain to you that this is what he wants to do with the movie, then you can build your lighting plans according to the kind of shots that you can anticipate. But with Nimbuda, with Nimbuda now, having said that I had a ceiling full of lights, if you notice there are shots which are crane shots, which start here, looking this way or looking this way, go up like this, turn around, come back on the other side. There's lots of stuff happening from here. So to have a huge crane and a camera protruding into this light, in a sense a light source, why am I not getting a shadow? No, but I can't, that shadow will come. I can just minimize that shadow, but the first and foremost, the shadow will come. And where is the camera? The camera is there. The light is already next to the camera. So which light do you want to put to kill this shadow? So two things there. One, that the light source is very soft, so the shadow is actually imperceptible. Two, that the crane itself is not a very bulky crane as maybe if you've seen pictures of cranes. It was a hothead crane, so it is actually a thin stem with cables. It was the Aquila. So to execute shots like that with actually the crane and the camera casting a shadow across the entire set, which you don't see because of the nature of the light. So those are also, I mean, those are things that you have to again find solutions to then and there, because the shot will emerge, you know. I have no clue how 300 was shot. I am waiting to find out. I have no clue of how this technology works. Sin City 300, firstly, I find it a big effort on my part to go and see these films, so I haven't seen them. And then I really have no idea, because digital cinematography and digital post meeting live action photography is state of art in these films. So, I mean, what you would find yourself, you might want to use a graduated filter to handle the sky, and you might even just, I find it actually using grads and polars I have very rarely done. So I just actually try and locate the shot in a way that, you know, those things will get handled. I try to see it in that space so that I can balance those things. Or if I'm going to let it flare, then I know that I'm going to let it blow out. So I will, if somebody has blocked something this way and it's not working for me, and there's something that I know in the landscape I will not be handled, I will probably move it around this way in my head first, work it out, bring the director into that space and say, why don't we do it here?